Hey everybody, Vacation Mort here with Riot Kent, and we're here for the Patch Post Mortem. They're back now that we're past all these shipping patches and things. We're into real patches. We can do the post mortems again. And I'm on vacation, but for this patch, since it was kind of Kent and I who locked it in while Static was on vacation, it kind of made sense for you and I to do the post mortem. And then the rundown, which will air tomorrow, I'm not going to be any part of because I don't know what the hell you guys are doing. But yeah, so welcome back, Kent. Welcome to Patch Post Mortems.
Yeah, Mort, really should be on full vacation, but he just cares about the game so much that he's here recording another video.
Yep, yep.
God.
It's true, it's true. But it's fun. Talking about TFT is fun. So, okay, so patch 11.10. We shipped this patch as kind of a cleanup patch to the launch, because launch was kind of all over the place with like Vayne reroll and a bunch of other comps that were doing. Felios was dominating for a while there. Heimerdinger comps, things like that. And I'll be honest, I think post patch, I don't want to say we made it worse. We just made it bad differently. I think would kind of be how I would sum up 11.10.
Yeah, I think it's like we made the game pace very different with some of the changes, which resulted in basically different pains that we have to then deal with
Yep.
for the next patch and try to clean up.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things too, and we'll talk about it a bit, is some of the changes of a lot of our systems with chosen versus not chosen. I think is causing a lot of pain here. Dealing with reroll and power spikes that weren't there before, the ability to come back without like a chosen high roll. A lot of these pain points are kind of really awkward, and I think it's going to take us some time to iron out those changes from the chosen system.
Yeah, for sure. And system changes like that are typically really impactful. So it's not something that it's not something that we can just rush and be like 5% down here. And so it requires a lot of testing, and we want to make sure we get it right.
Yep.
So it is something that we're working on, and you'll see what we have planned.
All right. So let's jump into it here. On the trait side, this was an A bomb 4 and 5 buff. I play a lot of A bomb. A bomb's kind of my favorite comp. And I'll be honest, I think these changes were good, but they were light, is what I'd say. It's like they didn't really do much. And I also will call out that I think right now, Abomination's in a really weird spot where the best way to play it is like an assassin, where you give him like IE Last Whisper Hurricane, and he charges in, explodes 3 or 4 blackliners, and then dies before he ever casts a second time, which is a little awkward. But definitely, like, I don't look at these changes and go, "Oops, we shouldn't have done it." I look and go, "Maybe we should have done more."
Yeah, for sure. I think I went really light on these. Didn't want to push it too far, but I think I could have. I had room to go a lot further. I think what we ended up seeing with Abomination Dispatch is that there's like a tiny spike in power, but it falls off really quickly again, the way it was to begin with. So I think like basically the numbers can go up a decent amount because of how much the Abomination falls off. We can allow like the spike to be bigger.
Yep.
And especially at A bomb 5 because you need a curse shadow spatula for that.
Yeah.
So definitely use way more power.
Yeah. I think long term, I would love to see him not quite be as damage focused and find a way to make him like actually be a tank. But there might be some bigger systemic changes. For example, like when he gets summoned, things like that that might be necessary to make that a reality.
Yeah.
Cool. Cavalier. This was a pretty big buff to, if I remember right at the time in the data, it was the worst trait in the game. Cavalier 3 and 4 were like damn near the bottom when we looked at the data 2 weeks ago. And I think this ended up working in the sense that like we're seeing Cavalier comps get played. There's the reroll Cavalier brand comp that if you high roll it can do pretty well into this meta. I think this was. I'm glad we didn't ship the 45 version.
Oh yeah. No, that version was scary.
Yeah,
But we're also seeing that the spatula can be used pretty well. Just like put it on a Mordekaiser, put it in some person who wants a gap closer, and they get 80% damage reduction every time they charge. I'm I don't think this pushed Cavalier into some S tier comp, but it opened up doors to like the spat can be good here, and then the four Cavalier reroll comp that I know you play a lot is a lot better now, and I see it in quite a few of my lobbies now too, and so that's good. I like the change.
yep, yeah. It'll be like I said, the spat in particular is pretty scary, more than the actual trait and units here. I think when you're forced to run Kled, it's like, it's not a big deal. But yeah, the Cavalier Katarina, Cavalier Mordekaisers, all very scary. All right,
Yep.
Dragon Slayer. Let's talk about one of our first big oopsies here. I think this was probably one of the bigger fuck ups of the patch. Dragon Slayer. It was interesting because if you look at 11.9, like no one was playing for Dragon Slayer. Particularly because Trundle hadn't really been figured out, Pantheon's value hadn't really been appreciated, and in both cases, a lot of true damage veins were sort of blocking them out from being particularly useful anyway. And so rather than letting the meta sort of adapt to itself, we kind of were like, hey, we need to buff Dragon Slayer so that people will play it more. And I think now for Dragon Slayer, like it almost doesn't matter what you run around the 4 Dragon Slayer, whether it's skirmishers, whether it's Dravens. There was even a game I played on stream Monday that was like reroll Dragon Slayer, and somehow it won. Like Dragon Slayers, I think crossed a line this patch.
Yeah, not only is the value really high, it was already high and it just got even higher, but I think a lot of the units within it just use this AP so well.
Yeah.
Especially something like Trundle, who scales like crazy with the AP gain by stealing a bunch of health and stats, and it just can get pretty bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah, Trundle and Mordekaiser with the giant shield. And frankly, like I know we don't talk about it much, but like even just the team buff of like here, have 60% more AP team probably crossed a line here. So I think this one will probably go down as one of the bigger oopsies of the set so far for sure.
Yeah, and you'll see we have ways of like trying to make sure that the trait is still like desirable. Nobody's really doing anything crazy with the Dragon Slayer spat yet. But it's also partially because like the units are really strong with it, and so I think if we can tune the units properly around the trait, I think it'll be good.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. The fact that all 4 units are so good means you don't need the spatula. So all right, Forgotten. We nerfed 6, buffed 9. I think the nerf on 6 was like perfect. Forgotten's still playable. You can still see them do well. They're overshadowed a little bit by some of the OP things right now, but like I think 6 Forgotten is like where it should be finally. You can still see a Vayne 3 reroll do decently. You can still see a 6 Forgotten Draven do okay, assuming it's not getting beat by the high rolls and the mid-game crap. The 9 Forgotten, though, what are your thoughts on this? Because I'm sure you've seen some data I haven't.
Yeah, so 9 Forgotten is crazy strong. I think we went... I think the buff was just like, it was weak. We went a bit too far. And so having 20 more AD and AP just makes the 9 Forgotten units really powerful. And they just rush down the other comps basically and deal a bunch of damage to the player. And so it's something really scary. And I think we've talked about this a little bit.
Now, I think this is a good point to bring up, though, because 9 Forgotten apparently is insane in the data. But is anyone playing it?
Yeah, I think it's... The reason it's hard to get to because you have to be level 9 and then you have to but the mid game, how strong the mid game is right now, or like how strong people get in the mid game right now with skirmishers, it gets pretty hard to get to that level. But like if you get there and you high roll, you're basically steamrolling everybody.
So it's probably dominating more in like the like platinum to diamond level than it is the challenger level.
Yeah, or regions who are more focused on economy rather than aggro.
That makes sense. Okay. Night 6. We buffed this. I think this is another case. This isn't as egregious as Dragon Slayer, but I feel like this is another case of us overreacting to something like Vayne in the meta that kind of buffed a trait that probably didn't need it, because we're definitely seeing a lot more 6 Night Kales now, and those 6 Night Kales are a bitch to deal with.
Yeah, 6 Night Kale, 6 Night, even 6 Night Varus. It's just, they're so tanky I think the number 9, like each point, each additional damage reduction here goes a long way, and I think going to 90 makes something like a 175 AD Draven do significantly less damage. After also like armor, Tarek has armor buffs and heals, and it just becomes really hard to burn through that front line and actually reach the Kale or reach any kind of backline really. So. Yeah, I think this one we ended up going too far on this buff.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think there's a lesson here of like, again, if something's kind of overpowering on the meta, don't overcorrect on some of the things that are directly countered by that particular meta. And again, I'll call out Vayne here, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Mystic. Mystic 4 buff. Seems fine. If you commit to Mystic, it seems to do okay. I think people still struggle with the concept that like 4 Mystic doesn't mean you automatically beat Vel'Koz. Because that's not how Mystic's ever supposed to work. But beyond that, there aren't like... The other thing is the shred. The fact that there's so much shred continues to be an issue for Mystics, but I don't think this was a mistake by any means.
No, I think it's a good change. I think it just there's still just a lot of shred in the meta, and so it becomes tough to appreciate the 200 MR that you get.
Yep. Verdant seems like a solid change here. If anything, it was a Kale comp buff, which is a little gross, but otherwise seems like this is a change, and people actually care about Verdant a little more now.
Yeah, it seems like a good change. I think I'm not seeing as much like Verdant splashes as I would like to. It might be unit related, or maybe just possibly just meta related. There aren't many meta comps that play this way, or Volibear's weak, so you don't really want Verdant right now, anyways. But I think overall the change is good.
Cool. Yeah, I think until Taric and Ashe somehow become more meta. But again, there's just so much, like, even the skirmishers don't really lose to Taric, so it's like, eh.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and without Volibear being a big threat, it just, there's no, like, thinking, oh, I should splash in Verdant to protect my carry.
Yep. Okay, Atrox. This is a weird change. I actually had a game where, it was a very weird game where I ended up getting 9 Atroxes at level 7. It was probably one of the weirdest games I've ever had in my life. But I had a fully itemized... i.e. Last Whisper, Bloodthirster, Atrox 3, and it wasn't exciting. Like, I look at these changes and I'm like, yeah, the number moved, but did it do anything? And it's like Atrox 2 is still good. It like didn't change anything. I don't know. I look at this change and I go, this seems like an inconsequential change that probably shouldn't have been made.
Yeah, I think like the build though, you need to go a little bit tanky. I'm thinking like Shadow Archangels, where you can, because he has innate healing, you can increase your health pool more and more and always heal back to the higher amount, and then with Redeemed keeping Atrox strong, this gives Atrox a way to kill people while also building tanky, and so it becomes that like fantasy of, oh, I'm a 1v9 drain tank.
Yeah, but even that version, because he's flat health based, the only version I've seen have remote success is like the double or triple Titan's Resolve, because that way you scale both the AD and the AP ratios. But even that's just weird. I don't know. I like the change is fine. It's one of those small changes, but I look at this change and I'm sort of like, what were we really trying to do here?
Yeah, I see it. I think there's something there though that hasn't been discovered and something fun, but I don't think it's a bad change per se.
Yeah. All right. Leona. I think this is a solid change. I think Leonas are still good. I think it does get overshadowed by skirms a little bit right now, but again, like once skirms are more in line, I think this is where Leona should be. Leona 3 still worth, still blocking a lot, still doing work in Kale comps. I think the AD is hilarious, but I don't know. I think this is just like getting Leona closer to where she should be.
Yeah, I agree. The move to like having more AD to be able to end fights, I think, ended up good. So
sweet. Oh, Lissandra. Okay, so clearly Lissandra was way out of line in 11-9. She was actually the most overpowered, like even more than Vayne. She was dominating more than Vayne in the data, if I remember correctly, right?
Yes, she was.
So now the way we did this was initially we had just planned to do the AD reduction nerf. Then in the A patch we did the damage nerf. I think the mistake here was doing both in the wrong order. I think what we needed to do here was pick a role for Lissandra. Is she utility or is she damage? If she's utility, then the AD reduction probably shouldn't have gone away. Like, if you 3-star Lissandra, you get this big utility that maybe this can actually counter skirms. Cool. If she's damage, then that was fine, but we went too hard on the damage. And so I think this was just a slight over nerf on at least one axis. But, like, it's good that she's not as dominating as she was. and I have seen a few people at least like top 4 with a Lissandra 3. But I do think pulling both levers as hard as we did was probably the mistake here.
Yeah, kind of agree. I think we need to pick more of a role and just we needed to pick more of a role and just only nerf one axis. But at the same time, I think Lissandra's numbers are still good. As far as like she can still be an item holder, she can still be a carry. Just I think this meta makes it really tough for her and renewers in general because of how the skirmishers want long fights, renewers also want long fights, and then these skirmishers are stronger right now, and so it becomes really hard to play a Lissandra carry right now. But I think as that changes, she'll have more of a place in the meta.
Yeah, I'm gonna push back on that just a little bit, only because again, like if skirmishers are meta and Lissandra's not working as a counter, what is Lissandra's purpose? Lissandra is literally designed to counter high AD champions. So I think that's kind of a like we should probably figure out what's going on there.
Although she does counter high AD champions, like skirmishers are constantly gaining AD, and then she's just healing. Like she's basically prolonging fights, but skirmishers want those prolonged fights. But she's really great for countering those like Dravens or Felioses who basically scale off AD and have like big crits, and then it makes those crits significantly smaller.
Okay, something to think about is the interactions there for sure. So, okay, Vayne. So this one was an interesting one because initially we just had the buff, and then that was like that Friday where Vayne started taking off and getting out of control. So then we had a nerf, and then you simmed it a bunch, and then we nerfed it even harder. Hilariously enough, though, I think it actually ended up right about where Vayne should be. You could maybe argue that Vayne 2 is a little weak, but I don't think so. From the few times I've seen her, I think this is another one of those cases where, again, I think Vayne's power level is correct now. I think it's being overshadowed by the things that are too good, but if you get like an early Shadow Zeeks and a Hurricane with a Vayne 2, like it's actually not that bad. And then if you reroll into the Vayne 3, it's still like a decent win condition. I know when I was still playing last week, I got a few seconds, thirds with this kind of comp. So like, I actually, believe it or not, I think for as problematic as Vayne was, I think we actually nailed Vayne's balance here.
Yeah, I think so. Vayne 3 is actually still really good. I think I kind of agree with you. Like Vayne 2 could be a little bit weak, but like the spike to at 3-star is just really powerful. I think nobody's really playing it because it's overshadowed right now by a bunch of the other comps. But I mean, yeah, I feel like Vayne feels really balanced now, especially from how badly balanced she was the last match.
Yeah. Okay, Udyr. Udyr, I think this is another change, kind of like the Atrox change. I just look at this and I'm like, but why? Specifically because it's just the Tiger stance. So it just means every 7 seconds or so when you cast your spell, you just burst a little harder. So, when I look at like Udyr's success criteria, that doesn't scream like what I'd be trying to focus on. So this one to me feels like a miss, and it's one of the many, like, I know when this patch was about to ship, everyone was like, 5 skirmisher buffs, they're out of their mind. And it's going to be funny because obviously skirmishers ended up in a bad state. I don't think this buff had anything to do with it, but I do think this buff is just another one of those, like, I guess.
I feel like this does have like a little bit to do with it because it makes the Udyr item holder for Jax stronger. But I see what you're saying, that like this definitely, I feel like this wasn't really necessary of a buff. We saw Udyr wasn't performing well in the data, and we saw that like nobody was really excited to play Udyr or even go for 3-star. 3-star Udyr was like especially bad. And so we went for a buff, but I think it was just not only too far, it's probably just unnecessary.
Yeah, Again, I know I'm being a little stingy. Maybe it's just vacation Mort here. But, it's like, again, just the Tiger stance buff. It's like, again, so you've got this auto-attacking Udyr with a certain amount of health, and every 6 seconds he hits a little harder. Like, I don't know. It just, when you look at the champion and what he's supposed to do, this just doesn't feel like the lever that you really want to lean into. But, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool, he bursts harder, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Warwick 3 buff. This feels like fine. I don't think this is bad. I think Warwick 3 is not dominating the meta, nor will he be, but if you happen to be playing that Vayne reroll and hit your Warwick 3, it's nice, and he gets a little extra power, so cool.
Yep.
I guess. All right, Brand. This, I think, is one of the cleanest changes this patch. I think this is like, you looked at a champion and went, 1 star's too free, 2-star feels about right, 3-star feels a little not worth, cool, and now it's better. Like, you have a 1-star Brand, you're like, God, I wish I had 2-star Brand. And you get a 3-star Brand, you're like, sweet, win condition. Like, I love this change, I love everything about this change, slam dunk.
I agree. I think this was a really good change. Both at 1-star and 3-star, like, Brand feels great now.
Let's see here. Hecarim starting mana. It's fine. Again, I think people are going to look at this and go, well, now Hecarim's doing well with Cavalier and things like that, and this buff was unnecessary. But again, it's just for that first cast. I don't think it changes anything for the Cavalier versions. I think it allows the Forgotten versions to be a little bit better. I actually think this change worked out just fine.
I think so. I agree too. This doesn't really hit the Cavalier stack very much, because if you're stacking a Hecarim in your Cavalier comp, he's going to cast anyways. This is just to help the naked Hecarims who don't have items in a Forgotten build or early game at 1-star just have that little bit more time. And I think it worked out really well. Like, I'm happy to field that Hecarim now, and I see that he can cast if I don't position him really poorly. So
yep. All right, LeBlanc. We lowered the stun duration at 3-star. I got to be honest, this is another one I look at and I'm just like, I guess. If you 3-star your LeBlanc right now, what I'm seeing is people actually itemize their 3-star LeBlanc. That's definitely one of the builds that can actually do well in the counter meta right now. You do the Shadow Blue buff, i.e. GA LeBlanc 3, and 0.5 seconds off the stun doesn't really matter because your spell's usually just one-shotting everything. I've seen it one-shot Jax 2s. So again, this change to me is just like, eh.
Yeah, it was an attempt to like reduce the amount of chains you see, but I think that like the 0.5 second just wasn't enough. I think it's kind of like we want to give champions who survive that initial burst a chance to react and actually like counter the LeBlanc who's at like 40% health chain casting with Dark Blue buff. I think we just probably didn't go far enough on the actual like. Yeah. What we want, we didn't accomplish what we wanted to do by reducing the chain stuns that LeBlanc had. So
yeah, I'm also just surprised how much damage a 3-star LeBlanc does. Like I said, one-shotting a Jax 2 is like surprising, but
yeah,
pretty crazy. All right,
especially with Coven AP multiplying with the crit.
Yeah, Coven 6 assassin. Yep. All right, let's see here. Allies will no longer chase targets that Syndra is tossing. It seems like that wasn't entirely fixed.
I'm not seeing it happen often. I think I've gotten reports of it with like Karma or something. I think it might be some weirder bug with like champions who aren't auto attacking, some kind of targeting thing that might be causing the problem.
Okay, fair enough. Hopefully we can get that more nailed down, but at least it was improved, so we'll take it.
Yeah. Hopefully we get this completely like fixed, but still looking into it.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
All right, set 3. This is another one of our last-minute changes. I gotta say, thank God. I think this was another, like, whew, it didn't kill the comp. People were still running it. Again, I think it's overshadowed by some of the OP shit right now. But assuming all that stuff got brought in line, I actually think set 3 is exactly where he should be. So, yeah. I'm glad we did this.
Me too. Yeah, set's still good. So, it's like, if we didn't do this, he'd just still be running over a lot of the other comps.
Okay, Trundle. This is probably one of the more interesting ones because I think it's obvious that Trundle right now is like in a very unhealthy situation. People finally figured out how to play Trundle, us included to a small extent. Trundle, the infamous clip with kiting is hard and his 2 3-stars getting destroyed by a 1-star no item Trundle is probably going to be one of those moments that will haunt us for another year or two. But what's weird is I look at these buffs and I'm like, other than the mana one, this didn't change anything. Like, these buffs are not the problem. It's like, should we have done these buffs? Well, clearly no, because Trundle's overpowered. Would Trundle still be in the state he's in without these buffs? Yeah. These buffs weren't the cause, but clearly Trundle's just like toxic for the game right now.
I think yeah, I agree with you. Like I look at this and it's like, well, I mean, this wasn't what made Trundle OP. I think it was more the Dragon Slayer buff.
Yeah.
A Trundle with 4 Dragon Slayer is stealing a lot of health for a lot of time. Not a lot of time, for a lot of health, kind of frequently.
Yeah.
And so that's like the scary part and what kind of made Trundle go overboard.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I don't know what you guys are cooking up for the next patch, but Trundle's definitely the kind of champion now I look at and I'm like, we've got some work to do. It's one of those more unique designs that came out of, coming up with a new set. But wow, does it do some really warping things right now. Trying to run anything remotely tanky is kind of a wash right now. So
Yeah, what we found with HP like percentage damage is the threshold kind of is around 30%. Like if you go over 30%, it starts to push into like scary territory, and you can go a little bit above it, but and it's still okay. But like right now, Trundle can get to like 80% and or like even over 100, and so that's what we're going to be tackling for next patch. Like just those extreme cases when you steal 30% of something, or you just deal 30% of something's health, it's not too egregious. But so we want to make sure to like reel back in like the extreme cases. And we saw this in like playtests with early stage Garen, where 30 he did 30%, 30 or 40, 50% of someone's health, and he would just wipe the entire board. And so like taking that learning basically and applying it here.
gotcha. Maybe more to do after that, we'll see. But yeah, again, that's the thing. I look at these buffs and I'm like, these buffs aren't the problem, but Trundle clearly became a problem. So
Yeah.
all right. Victor 3 buff. It was a pretty big buff, and I don't think it changed a damn thing. I mean, it helped the Cavalier Spellweaver comp a little, if you happen to hit your 3-star Victor, which is not really a big priority for that comp, but, like, it's fine. So,
Yeah.
seems fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Bigger shield. Nice. But I
Yeah.
don't know if it did too much.
Cool. 3 costs. All right, we got a lot to go. It's going to be a long video. Katarina. So I think before the patch shipped, if there was one change that we were getting a lot of grief for, it was this one. They're buffing Katarina? The Madmen. Why would they do that? I actually think this buff was correct, maybe. I'll put a big asterisk here. I think Katarina getting more health seems solid. I think Katarina 3 being more of a win condition is good. She feels like where the 3 costs should be to me. I feel like all the other 3 costs need to get on Katarina's level. I think she falls off in the late game, clearly. If I had one complaint with Katarina, it's that a single Katarina 1 might be too strong. Maybe. But I don't think the 50 health changes that. So I still think these changes were correct. If you told me 1 star needed a 25 damage nerf, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think this change specifically didn't make her overpowered or anything. I think she's in a good state right now, and yeah, it's possible maybe like 1 star is too strong, because 1 star Katarina early on is really strong. But I mean, maybe that's good, and maybe that's how 3 cost should feel, like impactful. But it
Yeah,
for sure it's something to.
that's a good point. Like maybe that's how 3 costs are supposed to be, and it's just she's an assassin, and assassins are always frustrating in the early game. So
Yeah, it just she targets your corner carry, and you're like, ah, man, yeah.
yeah, that could be it. All right, Lee Sin buffs. I don't think they did much. I mean, like these are good buffs. If anything, it made the Nightbringer Yasuo comp a little better. You could argue that this is another one of those skirmishers got a free buff thing. And I think there's some validity to that, but I don't think anyone's looking at Lee Sin right now and going, he's why skirmishers are OP right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least as a unit, just with these numbers, and he has like 0.75 attack speed, I believe. It's just really high. He's just a really good unit, but I think it's hard. No one really appreciates like what he does. And I'm also kind of sad that like we aren't seeing any Lee Sin threes, but that's I think partially related to like our system making it kind of hard to hit 3 costs right now.
Yeah, every time I go for a 3 cost carry, just 2-starring it is hard enough, let alone 3-starring it. So.
Yeah.
Oof. Okay, Lulu 3 buff. Sure. Like, I don't think this offends anyone, but 3 cost 3 stars have a bunch of other problems, and this didn't move the needle any, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think it's just you spend way too much gold right now trying to hit a 3-star 3 cost, and so system changes should help with this. But yeah, Lulu 3 even better. We're not really seeing it,
Yep.
anyways though.
Yep. Okay. Lux. Bug fix. Good. Yay.
Great.
Pantheon. Pantheon's another example where I look at this buff and I'm like, cool, he got a buff. Did this break the meta? No. I don't think. I mean, I guess actually, if this one I could be a little harsh on because unitemized Pantheon with some AP scaling with the free AD from skirmishers, I've seen him do a lot of damage. Famously, it'll be like I said, my Dragon Slayer reroll game where I had a Pantheon 3 with Redemption and Dragon Claw topping my meters. Probably not okay. I think looking at the skirmisher buffs, like this is probably the one I'd be like, yeah, we should have not done this one.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, well, so like Pantheon, I think his problem isn't really his damage output. We want him to be able to end fights, and actually, the fantasy there is like be tanky and be able to scale up. But I think he's just too tanky right now, and so like he's being able to scale up too freely. So I think like this buff was good. I think we also should have pulled down his defenses the way we did with Leona.
Maybe. I mean, I don't think you're wrong. I definitely agree that Pantheon is too tanky. So like no argument there. But if Pantheon's too tanky, upping his damage and allowing him to be both tanky and damaging, I think was clearly a mistake. And so I look at this patch change, I'm like, we shouldn't have done it. You know.
Yeah, or I mean, we should have done it in conjunction with like a compensation nerf, and so that's a mistake to do this alone for sure.
Yeah, and again, combine this and Dragon Slayer, and it's like, yeah, that's a bit. These are the two I'm like, these were big oopsies.
Yep.
Cool. Speaking of which, here's another one I think actually contributed very greatly to the skirmisher meta. Morgana nerf. I think this nerf was correct. We need like a 3 hex 3 cost AoE stun for free on GA was limiting what things can do. So I think we needed to do this 2 hex change. I think Morgana is too weak now, and she will need compensation buffs to make up for that. And I think it single-handedly was another thing where we like skirmishers kind of were like, oh, you mean that one unit that was countering our entire build is gone now? Cool, we're good again. And so I think this is one of those changes that's like should have been thought about a little more in conjunction with the domino effect it would have on the melee units in the game.
Yeah, and that's always the tough part. It's like thinking about all the other things it affects. But I agree with you. Like I think I think this change was necessary for sure because 3 hexes was just way too OP. But Morgana put Morgana in a pretty bad spot.
Yep. Cool. Nidalee, another skirmisher buff, but again, this one I look at and I'm like, should have done it. Like I'm actually Nidalee needs a buff. I think Nidalee's still kind of a garbage champion that you don't actually itemize. She's a trait bot. I think Nidalee's going to need a lot more work than this. So I don't think these changes were wrong. If anything, I love the mana cost change because she can actually get to Cougar form before she dies. But I think Nidalee's still a far cry from a real 3 cost.
Yeah, I agree. I think she needs more. She needed more than this. But this like was a step in the right direction. So good change.
Nocturne bug fix, good. Made Nocturne even better, good. Still not seeing a ton of 3 cost Nocturnes. I think if there are system changes coming that make 3 costs more viable, keep a close eye on this guy. He's gonna be a beefy. He's gonna be scary.
He heals a lot, but he doesn't seem too OP currently. We'll have to see with the system changes in.
Now I'm just curious what these system changes are. Because again, Vacation Mort has no idea. So, Nunu change. I think this is good. I think we're like very rarely, and again, this goes back to the 3 cost 3-star thing, but very rarely we are seeing some like Chinese Nunus come back, and so cool.
Yeah, I had a Nunu 3 game, and it was fun. I didn't do well, but I didn't have good items, but it was fun. And I think this is a good change. Eats more people.
Yep. Riven buffs. If you've watched my stream at all, you know I try to make Riven carry work a lot. And every time I do, I fall flat on my face. Watching my Riven 3 be unable to kill 2-star champions has been hell. I think Riven Like Nidalee is another champion that like these buffs are fine. Did they change anything? Nope. I think Riven needs a lot more love. Riven's reminding me of Xin Zhao a lot, to be honest. Of just like, she's a 3-cost AD melee champion that has no possible way to function. Good luck. And so I think Riven's one of those things I'd be like, we got to do something here.
Yeah, I agree. I think Riven's in a really awkward situation where she just, like, her numbers are good, her stats are good, she deals good amount of damage, but she can't really output that damage. She has like bad uptime and just can get locked down way too easily. And it just, but she also wants to be melee range, kind of to like have value in her stun. It's
Like
kind
I said,
of just really awkward.
it's Xin Zhao. I mean, everything you just said, you could say about Xin Zhao. And so it's like, I do have to call ourselves out on this of like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Like, maybe we shouldn't be printing these 3-cost melees that have giant glaring weaknesses. We should figure out a way to make them work. So
yeah, I agree, and it's a bigger project for sure to like figure out how to make Riven work.
Yep. On the opposite end of Riven though is Yasuo, who actually is one of the few 3-cost carries that is working. This was a buff to 3-star, which is like cool. 3-star Yasuo is a legit win condition if you can hit it. It's hard as hell to hit, but my god, if you hit it, it's strong. And even 2-star Yasuo is one of the few 3-costs that, like, with a solid 6 Nightbringer comp, can get you a solid second. So, I think Yasuo's in a decent spot. I think this change was fine. Good times.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said.
Cool. Zyra 3 buff. Shrug. It's fine. Draconic got a buff, I guess. Not many Draconic players were really playing Zyra anyway, but cool, I guess.
But now you can, and you can itemize with some Jeweled Gauntlet and do a lot of damage. But yeah,
I don't think has anyone ever itemized Zyra and been happy with it? Like, because a few times I have, it's like she hits once really hard and hits like 2 or 3 things, and then she never casts again. And why did you not put those items on Vel'Koz? You know?
Yeah. I see her as more as like the secondary damage dealer in Vel'Koz. Like, you put items on her, and then she helps chunk like the entire front line and some of the back line that gets caught in you know the root. And so she's like good, but it's not something that you're like, oh, I really want to 3-star her and itemize her. It's
the change was solid though. So
yeah.
Okay, Felios. Felios, I think, presented a problem to me that I've become more aware of as I've been thinking about this over break when I'm not supposed to be in my dreams. I think we had to do this change where a Felios spell should be able to crit. I think I don't even look at these numbers and be like, oh, we nerfed him. I think even if you undid this change, I think Aphelios would be bad in the current meta. I don't think this change did anything to that, because Aphelios would still lose to these skirmishers. He'd still get his ass kicked. It's just like the meta went in a way that he couldn't benefit anymore. If anything, it was the B patch before that brought him down a lot. That's the bigger thing here.
Yeah, 1080 was a lot.
But I think the thing about Aphelios here that made me realize is that we have a lot of AD spells this game, right? Set, Atrox, Callista. I'm blanking on others because I haven't been thinking about TFT as much, but you get the idea. There's a bunch of them. They all want IE. All of them want IE. And the reason I bring this up is because the thing that this did to Aphelios that I think was harmful is it actually limited his item path much more. Now you feel like you have to have IE on Aphelios. And because you have IE, you're like, well, I got to get Last Whisper too. And then you're like, well, that's 2 of my items already done there. And so I think, for example, like Deathblade Aphelios is now much weaker than IE Aphelios. And I think there's a problem for us to solve here where all of our AD spellcasters want IE.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about what you just said, and I think a lot of that is because we shifted from pure AD scaling to AD plus base, and the base, because you don't need just purely want AD, the base can crit, and so that makes it better. I think partially that's also related to like Deathblade being weak. I think if Deathblade was stronger, the Deathblade Rune's Hurricane, or even just Deathblade Felios, because Felios hits everybody.
You can't see it because I know you can't see my camera, but I'm shaking my head no, because I think actually like you could double Deathblade's power And I think IE is still the better item if you math it out. Just the way this all works, and like you said, with the base damage. So I think long term there's a problem to be solved here on like critical strike and how critical strike is almost necessary on like every damage dealer here. That's so like I'm glad we made this change. And if it comes to this learning about how like crit is sort of dominating our damage dealers, I'll take it. I'll take the learning. But the reality is the end result is Felios is garbage. I don't think this change made him garbage, but I think Felios is garbage right now.
Yeah, I agree.
So, okay, next one. So this one, I want you to say your opinion first because let's be clear. This change shipped because I asked for it to be shipped, right? Like I was the one who was like, look, I want Draven to have lower mana so that he can proc Legionnaire more and open up his itemization. How did that change land?
Yeah, Draven is really good right now. I know I think I know your opinion on this. I actually think that, like, I personally ended up liking this change. I think it does something cool where you don't have to build BT. Because Draven casts more, he takes more advantage of Legionnaire, and you can just build straight damage. Then you just have to, position and protect properly so that he can actually continue to get cast off. I think without compensating in another way by nerfing him, his damage a little bit, he just became way too strong, ramps up way too quickly. But I mean, personally, I think it's a change that changed Draven's profile like in the way we wanted to.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think I should have waited on this buff. I think it is the right direction buff. I think, like you said, it'll get his profile where we want it to be so that he can take advantage of Legionnaire more. But I think doing this without shifting his profile was the mistake here. And I think that's the correct call out here. It's just shouldn't have rushed it in, should have waited a patch. That being said, he is one of the few things that are beating skirmishers sometimes. So if I didn't ship this, would skirmishers just be that much more dominant? ? That would be scary. But correct thing here would have been shift the profile, not just buff him.
Yeah.
Cool. Ivern, I think this change didn't change much, although from what I gather, it might be because there's a bug going on or something.
Yep, there is currently a bug that you'll see in the patch rundown. But basically, Daisy's not scaling properly.
Okay. So we'll have to see the long-term effects of this change. So, all right. Mordekaiser nerf. I mean, good, but Dragon Slayer buff clearly counteracted this, and people learning how to optimize Mordekaiser even more. It just wasn't a nerf enough. I'm glad we nerfed him. I think he's still insane. I think the repeated frontline he provides makes him a better tank than Rel, which is not correct. So, some work to do on Mordekaiser, I think.
Yeah, right direction. I think magnitude was too small. I think we could have gone further. It just his repeat casts are wild. He just constantly, like, you think you're gonna kill him? Nope. Back up with a full, like, huge, gigantic shield. So
yeah, I mean, the shield scaling, again, we talk about the Dragon Slayer AP, and his is % health based, and then it scales with Warmoth. Like, the scaling on this spell is nutty, and I think it's one of the most multiplicative defensive things we've ever done. I think his offense is actually fine. I think the amount of offense he provides is what we wanted. I think his defensive profile is just ludicrously overpowered.
Yeah, and the window to kill him is just so small, and so that's not only is he like super tanky, it's just that you have a really small window to kill him.
Yep. Rel stun duration, good. She's still really good champion. She still provides a big shield to your team, and she stuns people.
And still has great traits.
Yep.
Very good.
Yep. Cool. Garen, this was a last minute change we put into Garen 1. I think you and I both know we had more work to do. I think Garen's still nutty, although, again, he's another one of those victims of, like, yeah, he's good, but Trundle exists, so not that good right now. But he's the kind of champion that under no world would you ever buff, because as soon as if Trundle ever disappeared from the meta, Garen would be back to God King status.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Heimerdinger nerf. I think this was correct. Again, I think, like, the 4 Invoker high roll is still the best comp in the game if you can get there. It's just getting there that's the hard part right now. So I think Heimerdinger's like fine.
Yeah, I think Heimer fell off. I mean, I think Heimer's damage might not be like it's a really scary cast that needs a lot of mana. The cast might not be scary enough. But also, yeah, just in general, trying to play a Heimerdinger comp is really tough right now because of how fast the meta is.
Okay. Kindred. This change is another one, kind of like the Atrox one, where I'm just like, I guess we made it.
Yeah.
Why? What did I mean? Certainly, Wolf wasn't appreciable, and I can see shifting power away from Wolf. But like, Kindred, is anyone playing Kindred right now? I think mostly because Felios doesn't exist, Kindred doesn't exist. But yeah, Rangers in particular just like trash right now.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure this change really did anything, or did what we want. It just secretly, like, Wolf was really good, and now secretly Wolf is not as good. But
Yep.
yeah, I don't think it changed that much.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't think anyone's playing Mystics right now, really. So, which makes sense if everything's Dragon Slayer and Skirmisher. And anyway,
Yeah, just in that rare Kale comp most of the time. That's
Yep.
where Kindred shows up.
Teemo 1 buff, solid. I think it was good. I don't think this broke anything. I think Teemo's probably in a really good spot.
I agree. Yeah, this
Okay.
was good for Teemo.
Yeah, I think a lot of our things are going to be, they're in a good spot. They're just overshadowed by the broken shit right now. So, items. Nerfing Chalice. Fine. I know it's painful, but it's fine. I think a lot of my comments on items are going to be, well, it just makes everyone build Jeweled Gauntlet and IE a lot more. So that's the one negative I'm going to see with a lot of these items. But, you know, I think lowering the potential of, you know, your 3-item Karma who then also has 3 chalices, I think is healthy for the game.
Yeah, basically, exactly what you said. It's like the 4th and 5th item. Basically, we're lowering the extreme like ceiling potential of a lot of the champions with these R item changes.
Yep. Dark Shroud. This change was amazing. I love this change. I love everything about it. This change is amazing.
Yeah, this was good. I think it was really necessary too.
Dragon Claw buff. Good change. Didn't really matter because the meta is mostly physical damage and the shreds are still there. But I think this change is good. So happy with that.
Yeah, good for long term. I agree.
Yep. Shadow Sunfire. I think this change is really good. I think this is actually one of those changes that secretly, not a lot of people are doing it, but I think secretly it actually helps skirmishers more than anyone. The fact that they start with a shield, which means you have to burn through that shield to give it more time to proc, I think is one of its best things. But just in general, the item was already good. I don't think I regret shipping this change, but I do think it is one of the things that has possibly helped a little bit. So
yeah, it's a. I mean, now it's just a really good item. I heard some other like top players talk about how great this item is now too. I don't think anyone's building it right now because of they're prioritizing a lot of the other items like Warmogs for their Mordekaiser. But like the performance of the item is great. I think the play rate has gone up, so people are playing it, and so like reducing the scary self damage was good for the item.
All right, Spectral Giant Slayer. This was a really risky change. To be honest, I was expecting this item to take off. It hasn't. I have not seen this item built for shit.
In the data, it's actually a really good item. It jumped significantly because of this change, but like we're not really seeing anyone prioritize it. I think it's more of just like it's a nice to have extra multiplier when I already have my core of IE Last Whisper or whatever else.
Yeah, see that, and the fact that this item is barely being built is another like big warning sign to me that like some of our other items are off, because if you're not building, this item is insane with its multiplicative scaling, and if no one's building this, we've screwed something up.
I think still though, like one thing that it's affecting its play rate a lot is that you have to commit to this like you don't know if you can commit to this early. Like you definitely don't want to build this in stage 2 when you get your first shadow items because of it doesn't do anything for you at that point. And so I think it's just kind of harder to play. Like it's something that you build later, kind of like Trap Claw. So
right, but
that's part of it.
Okay, but like if hypothetically, if Jeweled Gauntlet and this item were balanced, right, you would build Jeweled Gauntlet for a stronger early game and this for a stronger late game.
Right.
But right now, I think Jeweled Gauntlet is the better late game and early game.
Oh, I was gonna say you build one of each because 3 times
Well, yeah,
multiplication.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. But I'm just saying, like, when it comes to your first damage item, like, it comes down to this should be better in the late game and weaker in the early game. But right now, it's just weaker at both points.
Maybe. Yeah.
So
I don't know for sure, but I mean, I think I don't think it needs to go up in power or
no,
anything.
no, 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 definitely
You're
not.
just talking about the item.
Definitely
Okay,
not.
gotcha.
Definitely not. If it, like I said, I think the top. This is the theme of this entire patch to me: is the top is overshadowing the rest of the game, and that's true of items also. I.e.,
Makes
Last Whisper, Jeweled Gauntlet are overshadowing everything else. Warmogs, Redemption. You know, it's like that top is blocking out the bottom 80% of the game.
Yeah.
So
Okay, I see what you're saying.
okay, Frozen Heart. We changed both Shadow and Normal. I think this change was great. I think when your team gets Frozen Hearted, you're still like, damn it. But I think it's like not as damning now, so good.
Yeah, it's less oppressive, but still like a really good item. Both of them are still really good items.
Yep. Fallen GA nerf seems fine. I think if anything, most of the users that were using the item just aren't around anymore. The Morganas, the Volibears. I think Katarina still likes this item, but otherwise, Brand's okay with it, but usually prefers other things. So I don't know. I think this item's probably in a good spot now.
Yeah, good change. Nothing out of
Yep.
line, I think.
Ionic Darkspark. This item is insanely overpowered now, and again, I think no one's building it because it's overshadowed by all the best stuff in the game. There's no reason to build this when you can build a Jeweled Gauntlet. I've gotten this number up to 340, by the way. I've played this on Champions. I've seen this as high as 340. 340 is insane. It's still not that good.
I think part of this, the reason this one isn't as good is that a lot of the users of it get AP from other sources, and so you just want to multiply that with crit.
Yep.
Just putting more AP is not as valuable as adding crit. But like I've seen some cool builds with this, and so I'm excited that people are like, I'm happy that people are getting excited about the item and building some. And like 340 is like, how high can I go and how strong can I
get? That's what I'm saying. I love the item. I think this was a good change. It's just that same problem we've been preaching for almost an hour now. It's just, why build this when you can build a Jeweled Gauntlet? So
Yep.
Okay. Let's see here. Locket, the Shadow Locket buff, good. Makes Cavalier comps pretty good. I love that people are starting to realize, by the way, this item is actually really good on like Brand and Katarina also. That's really fun. So starting to see this item built. I think it's probably as high as it can go at this point. Again, Shred is kind of making it less valuable, but seems like a good item.
Yeah, I think the item might be a little bit OP now, actually, but like nobody's really building it. Nothing really to be afraid of yet. But like these numbers are really high.
Okay. The Jeweled Gauntlet rework to basically say screw you, Vayne, and there's one other champion that says screw you too. I can't remember who it is.
Nocturne Kale.
Oh, that's right. Nocturne and Kale.
But like, I mean, it was mostly Vayne.
Yeah. Good change. Brought them into balance, made their items go. But again, if you tell me one item that's like the most OP on like Vel'Koz, it's this one. So, but I'm glad we made this change. Like, this is just a solid change. We should have made this. Different problem.
Yeah.
So, Sacrificial Redemption. I think this is fine. I think the item is good. I think it's slept on because it doesn't have the AoE damage reduction that the normal one does. But I think this version of the item actually feels a lot more balanced than the normal one.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's also just in general people are not using their shadow belts for Shadow Redemption when they could be building like Shadow Warmugs or something, and so it's being overshadowed. But I think the item, this was a good change for the item and made it power level up.
At least for this post-mortem, the word of the day isn't nudge; it's overshadowed. Overshadowed is the word of the day. So, okay. Spectral Spear Shojin. I haven't seen anyone build this. I think this was a good change. It just didn't do enough. Does anyone build this item?
No, we haven't seen it, but I mean, I'm saying there's something out there. Just people aren't building it. But yeah, I think the damage penalty. I thought like reducing it would make it more popular, but I think people are still not really trying to play around with it. So
Titan's Resolve. This item is fun now. I think this was the correct change. I'm glad we made this change. People still figuring out what champions it's good on. Atrox being one of them, but I haven't seen it like break the game or anything, so I'm just glad we did this change.
Agree.
Um, let's see. Zerat portal changes, working on A-bomb again. Seems like it's fine now.
Yeah, nothing out of line. You know, nothing crazy. Just it's good, and it's good interaction. It exists.
Yep. Shadow Warmogs. I think this was a good change because now people actually like the item compared to just Warmogs. I do think both Warmogs and this are slightly too strong and too preferable right now. But I'm still glad we made this change.
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit surprised that it wasn't like this at launch because of how much health scaling we have in this set. But you know, at this point, it's kind of like what I expected. Like Warmogs is a popular item,
Yep.
And Shadow Warmogs is a really popular item. But yeah, I think this change was good. It was just the value of the item was kind of low, and so this makes it a lot better.
Yeah, and I'll take a minute again to preach, by the way, that Warmogs with 0 changes went from an underpowered item everyone thought needed buffs to an overpowered item with 0 changes. And again, that's something we just have to keep an eye on with sets, is that different items will have different values in different sets. But Warmogs, I think, will always be this baseline of like, it's 1,000 health. Deal with it.
Yep.
So, finally, Shadow Zeeks. I actually think this nerf was a mistake, but it's a mistake we got away with because of everything else. Like, I think the item was already insane. I think putting this on a Nocturne, putting this on a Vayne, hell, even putting this on a frontliner like a Jax can do some real good stuff here, or Yasuo. The amount of, like, I think this is just better Ginsu's. The item is just better Ginsu's by a large margin. That upfront burst is so much more valuable. But, again, I think we got away with it. I think it's fine. And right now, shadow items get to be a little bit better because they're so much harder to get. So, I don't think it did any harm.
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, this is part of like the package of like tuning down the curses that you get with shadow items. But I don't necessarily agree with you that like this is as good. This is just better at Ginsu's. Like I think there are the fast comps like Assassins, Vayne, Forgotten that want this, like Draven comps. But then there are like the slow comps that want the ramp up and want to go to unlimited, such as like
Kayle.
or like and
Yeah.
so different profiles. I don't think
That's fair.
this needs
That's fair.
item like necessarily.
I agree with you. You're right, because like Kayle for sure is like, I don't want Shadow Zeeks. I want this. I want Ginsu's. So that's fair. That's fair. Cool. All right. Rank rewards. I'm glad we shipped them. Yeah, those are cool. And then bug fixes. Bug fixes are good. We don't necessarily need to go over all of these. So bug fixes are good. All right. So that's it for the Patch Post Mortem. I think definitely not one of our best patches. Certainly the result here. I think a lot of, like, some of this was our changes. The Dragon Slayer change, the Pantheon change. Some of this, though, was just... some of this was our changes in those. Some of this was not accounting for what our changes would do. Things like taking Vayne out of the meta and the domino effect that would have. And then some of it was just people learning how to optimize things that they hadn't optimized because they weren't playing it as much. So definitely a lot to take into there. And it'll be interesting to see where the next patch goes.
Yeah, I think with a patch this big, it was it was hard to predict everything. But with every patch, basically, we were taking away learnings so that we can make future patches and future sets better.
If I had one more call out that I think is a regret to me, it's that we look at our tier 3 and we changed 11 champions with sort of one of the goals of like getting more 3 costs to be more viable. I think we mostly missed on that goal because other than like Pantheon being better, I don't think much changed here.
Yeah, but that signaled to us that like, you know, the system changes needed to be made in order for this to happen.
Yeah, I suppose you make the champ changes to see if you can get the effect, and if you can't, it gave us more time to look at the system changes. I suppose that's true. Our players certainly aren't patient when it comes to those kind of changes, but yeah, you're right. Maybe it needed some of that. So
yeah, and I mean, by doing this like and learning from it, in the future we just end up getting faster at this, and so it's like something positive to take away from it.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, that is going to do it for the Patch Post Mortem. We're about to hit 1 hour here. I am going to Ninja Smoke Bomb back to my vacation. Kent, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I've gotten a couple messages on Slack actually, seeing you in this channel with me, saying, "Kent, why are you and Mort in a channel talk? He's supposed to be on vacation." So I'm.
Oh, that's funny. Just for this, I'm going back to ignoring work and doing my thing. But it made sense for us to do this since Static was on vacation for some of this. So patch rundown will be tomorrow, and I'm not gonna be in it, so that'll be fun.
Oh wow, yeah, that's gonna be scary. But yeah, no, I'm glad that you came back. I'm happy to talk to you again, Mort.
Yeah. All right, well, that's going to do it for this video. Patch Postmortems will come back now that we're doing this, so we'll keep doing these every 2 weeks. I know they're not the most watched videos, but those of you that do seem to enjoy them, and it's part of our being transparent and talking about where we fucked up. And this patch had some fuck-ups, not going to lie. So, all right, until next time, that's going to do it for us. Take it easy.